So anyway, some of you know I was on vacation last week. I went to Arizona, met up with 10 of my college friends, all men. This was for a 30-year reunion that was a year late. We get together, we all turned 50, and so we wanted to get together, but of course, now we're all 51. We rented a house, beautiful house up against Camelback Mountain in Paradise Valley, really beautiful. We had all kinds of plans, all these things we were going to do. And one of the first things was a group was going to hike up Camelback Mountain, and they were going to take the difficult side because, you know, of course they were. And maybe a lot of you don't follow the local news in Paradise Valley, Phoenix area. Anybody? Because if you did, you would have seen this. This is from the Arizona Republic. Injured hiker rescued at Camelback Mountain. Spoiler alert, it was not me. But a friend of mine who's in incredible shape. This is what the article says. A 50-year-old man, close, was rescued at Camelback Mountain Friday morning, according to the Phoenix Fire Department. Phoenix and Scottsdale firefighters received reports from passerby hikers who found the man lying under a tree, unable to move, according to Captain Scott Douglas with the Phoenix Fire Department. And so they came with a helicopter, they lowered a rope, they strapped him into a chair. We were all watching, like those of us that weren't there, we were actually watching from the backyard of our house, and we have video of him getting lifted up on this rope in this little chair. It was all very harrowing and terrifying, and also hilarious, but not. But he's doing well. And part of what I want to say about this is we had 2 doctors in our group. So he was very well cared for. Like he had 2 doctors literally go to the pharmacy for him to pick up his meds. So he was maybe too well cared for. And in fact, the doctor he saw at the hospital, I'm sure had a very difficult day with these 2 doctors coming in to help. I want to say this about the article as well, because we sent it to our families, and the first reaction of everybody was, he was found by passerby hikers? They just left him there? And that is just one of many things that weren't true in the story, right? I mean, he was not 50. He was not lying down. His friends were there with him. And also, for some weird reason, they added a tree that was not there. There was literally no shade. Because if you've been on Camelback Mountain, the part of the story that makes the least sense is, there's a tree? Really? I never saw it. Now, obviously, this experience shaped the whole weekend, right? You have these plans, all these things, you scuttle the plans, you change things up. We're taking care of him. He stayed with us through the weekend and we took care of him. But in the end, it was strange the power that event had over our weekend, right? Like it changed our expectations, it deepened our conversations, and in the end, there was a lot of gratitude in this. And I think the reason is, when it happened, our focus shifted from ourselves to each other, right? Because we went with expectations of, I'm going to get this out of this weekend, or I'm going to experience this, or I'm going to do this. And then when that happened, it all became about how we could make it better for each other. Change the whole focus from us, from ourselves to each other. And it was incredibly powerful. It had a wonderful impact. Now, I'm sure he's not grateful that this happened to him. But there's a gratitude in the experience that we shared that came out of that. See, in our Bible story today, that's part of the theme, right? When we focus on ourselves and what we get, it's really hard to be grateful. See, in the story, everybody, all the laborers, no matter how long they work, all get the same thing in the end, and yet every single one of them is very unhappy at some point in the story. Right? Because some people get picked early and they're really happy they got chosen to come work in the vineyard. And the ones that weren't chosen are angry and upset that they weren't chosen. Eventually everybody gets chosen, and when everybody's paid the same thing, the people who worked all day are unhappy because they got paid the same thing as these people who came late. When we focus on what we get and on ourselves, that's what leads to resentment, right? When we're comparing ourselves to each other. Gratitude comes when we root for each other, when we try to help each other, when we're trying to lift each other up, We open ourselves up to the experience of gratitude, which is the experience of God in the world, seeing God and acknowledging the presence of God in our lives, and of goodness and of love. There are a lot of themes in this story about these laborers, right? Some people say this is a story about socialism. Everybody should get the same thing. And then, of course, some people have to say, no, the Bible hates socialism and Sesame Street is communist and all that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's probably not about the economic system that Jesus is trying to construct, but it is a little bit about what we have. Because this follows immediately after Jesus says it's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into heaven. He's saying when you have a lot, it's hard to be grateful. You know, we are quick to resent each other, right? Everybody gets the same thing in the end, but I worked more. But the answer that Jesus gives is very important. He said, yes, but you had opportunities that others didn't have, right? They didn't have the chance to work. They didn't get picked to work. You had opportunities they didn't have. So don't resent what they get. Be grateful for your place in this. Now, the traditional interpretation about this parable is that it's about heaven, right? That no matter when you come to faith, you're going to get the same reward from God in the end, which is a very valid interpretation of this. But to me, it's much more human than that. It reminds me of the older brother in the Good Samaritan parable. Do you remember the Good Samaritan not the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son? The prodigal son parable, the older brother, where the younger brother has gone out and wasted all his family's money and comes home and is welcomed by his father. His father throws a party, and the older brother's reaction, he can't be happy. He can only resent what his brother is getting that he doesn't deserve. He doesn't deserve it. It's the same in this parable, pointing at these people. Well, they didn't work long enough. They don't deserve it. The more we have, the harder it is to feel grateful when we don't get it, because we think we deserve it. And we fight to hold on to whatever we have. And we start to resent people who maybe endanger what we have. We see a lot of that in the world right now. People who are fearful, who are even hateful, who are trying to hold on to what they imagine somebody's trying to take away. See in the story, even though the people who were chosen first, they got exactly what they were promised. But it wasn't good enough anymore because somebody else got the same thing. That's how we are, right? This is all these parables. They're stories about who we are and how we are in the world, and they challenge us to shift our focus, to think differently. One of the greatest dangers is this idea that life is a competition and that joy and happiness is something that is in limited supply and has to be competed over. We ask this question, what are we entitled to? We ask it too much. Because the truth is, in terms of our faith, part of what this parable is saying to us is that no. Faith isn't fair. You don't get what you deserve or what you're entitled to. Faith says the more you have, the more responsibility you have. You know, when the Bible talks about chosen people, it doesn't mean people who are privileged or better than somebody else. Chosen people means people with added responsibility to do for others, to be signs of God in the world. They don't get more. We say that's not fair. Everybody should be treated based on what they do. But faith, that's not what faith is about. It isn't about fair. From those to whom much has been given, much will be required. That quote is often attributed to JFK, but it is from the Bible, I swear. I've seen it. But it's true. It's true about money, but it's true about everything else. If we look, we want to be angry about the ignorance of others. Well, they don't know this. They don't understand this. Well, faith says, if you know more, if you know something they don't know, then you have more responsibility. It isn't about them being terrible. It's about you needing to do more. But that's not fair. I'm already doing so much. But faith, it isn't about fair. It's about seeing God in the world and believing in what that means and who we should be and what we should do and how we should respond. You know, I don't want to talk too much about this, but I know a lot of us were very angry about the Rittenhouse verdict this week, where he was acquitted in the killing during the protests. And it has terrifying implications, and it was enraging for so many. But again, it's not about what we're entitled to. The question is not, what is it I should get or we should get? The question is, what should I do? Who should I be in the world? Seeing what I see, knowing what I know, what am I called to? That's the question of faith. I think about this in relation to global warming, right? We know this is a crisis. We even know how to make a difference. And yet we say, well, what are other countries doing? You know, we don't want to do more than our part. We don't want to, what's somebody else doing? And I'll look at that. That is a question that faith says we should never ask. What is somebody else doing before we decide what we should do? Faith says no. If you know what to do or should be done, then you do that. You don't have to ask what anybody else is doing. You don't have to wait to find out what somebody else's part will be before you know your own. Faith says do what is right. Do what you hear God calling you to do, and trust that others will do their part. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Faith does what is right. Faith rejoices in the success of others. This parable is simply telling us how God looks on us. As favored as we may think we are, God looks on every person as a beloved child, worthy of that love. Sometimes it's hard to be grateful. It's hard to see God in the world. But if our eyes are open, we see God in unexpected places. I saw God this week in a dear friend of mine strapped to a chair, swinging back and forth under a helicopter as he got lifted up. I experienced God through that. I never saw that coming. When we focus on ourselves, it's really hard to see God in the world. The invitation for all of us on this Thanksgiving, is to open our eyes and our hearts and our minds to one another. Thanks be to God. Amen.